It's a wild world out there, but some worlds are even wilder. Hi, I'm Tyler Hapney, and you're listening to Dungeons and Dystopias. Thank you for listening. Hello, and welcome to Dungeons and Dystopias. My name is Tyler Hapney, and I am your Gamemaster and host. I have run a combined total of over 200 sessions of Dungeons and Dragons and Cyberpunk Red, so I happen to know quite a bit about both of those systems, and I am here to talk to you a little bit about them. For those who don't know, Dungeons and Dragons and Cyberpunk Red are tabletop role-playing games, which basically means you're a bunch of nerds gathered around a table, and you determine the outcome of actions based off of the roll of dice. Now, it doesn't have to be dice. I will say, if you go online, there are some tabletop role-playing games that are not played with dice. There is a YouTube channel, Smosh, probably Smosh Games. They do a series where they do a tabletop role-playing game with Jenga. So yeah, you can pretty much play it with just about anything, so long as there is someone there who can tell a good story, and can also deliver on game mechanics and typically game rules, something to keep everything grounded so it's not an improv sesh, which, there's nothing wrong with making an improv session out of your D&D games. In fact, sometimes those are the most fun, but sometimes we're here to be a bit more serious. So, right, Dungeons and Dragons, as you've probably heard of Dungeons and Dragons, no matter who you are, whoever is listening, it is a multi-million-dollar franchise. I'd say probably billion-dollar by this point. There's multiple podcasts that are just famous for playing Dungeons and Dragons. And it's been around since the 70s, so it's kind of hard not to have heard about it by this point, I'd say. But Dungeons and Dragons is definitely the standout, most popular tabletop role-playing game out there on the scene. And I mean, it's by miles. Like most people, they don't even understand that there are other systems than Dungeons and Dragons in this kind of sense. So to bring in Cyberpunk, I mean, Cyberpunk is a setting that just recently got a major AAA video game made out of it. And I think that has really upped the name recognition for Cyberpunk, but it's still not to the point where people understand that Cyberpunk, it didn't start as a video game. It started as in the 80s as a tabletop role-playing game like Dungeons and Dragons, but that's not exactly in the common zeitgeist as Cyberpunk 2077, the hit video game, is. I don't know. I personally think that there should be a bit more focus put onto the older Cyberpunk stuff, but who am I to say? I'm a game master. I'm biased. So, as for me, I've been playing these types of games since 2017. So just about 7 to 8 years now. And I have ran through Dungeons and Dragons, Vampire the Masquerade, Fallout 2D20. I've played a little bit of Paranoia. I've looked into Pathfinder, Starfinder. Obviously, I mean, who hasn't looked into Warhammer? It's all very interesting stuff to me. I always have a really good time looking into those sort of things, but it is a lot of work, especially when you're running the types of games I am. For Dungeons and Dragons, it's mostly homebrew. So a lot of the story I create. Sometimes I'll create the setting. It really depends. But for the most part, I play a lot of my stuff for Dungeons & Dragons lately in the Forgotten Realms setting. So it's the official Dungeons & Dragons setting. So I do read a lot of official content for that. For Cyberpunk, it is pretty much all homebrew. It kind of has to be. There's only really 2 official books of missions for Cyberpunk Red. So there's, it's kind of limited, slim pickings right now. And it's definitely not enough to fill over 100 sessions. So, it's a lot of my own creativity working off of the back of Night City as a setting, which, by the way, fantastic setting. If you haven't looked at all into Night City background or lore, we'll be getting into that next episode. So hey, stick around. But other than that, yeah, I mean, This is a podcast about Dungeons and Dragons and Cyberpunk, so mostly going to be trying to stick to those ones. Just know, I've got experience in others, but so the type of game I runs, I mean, my campaigns for D&D, it's typically campaigns. So campaign is like one overarching story. You've got a main plot line, side quests. It's like Lord of the Rings type stuff. For Cyberpunk Red, I'm running more of a West Marches Living World kind of campaign. And for those who don't know, West Marches campaigns are like, let's say you've got a group of people who want to play this system, but it's like a lot of people, like 7 to 8 people. You basically want to have groups that, like, sort of subsections of this larger group that go out and do these missions, and they can sort of choose and pick and choose which mission they do, which storyline they pursue. And this is all kind of working towards this overarching, larger storyline that has to do with how the city of Night City in this instance is sort of building itself back up. And it's the city that's kind of its own sort of character in this sense. I don't know. It's an interesting type campaign. Time moves in that world very similar to our own, so the dates pretty much line up when we do our missions or whatever. We've got a lot of Saturday edge runners. But I mean, it's really rewarding. It is way more effort than a typical campaign, because typically I have to design multiple missions at once, in case they decide to do one or the other or whatever. I've got a PDF it's got like 30 different missions available, just because I've kind of built them up over time. Also, sometimes I'll just write my ideas down and then I'll design them later. It's worked out. But yeah, I've had so much experience with these systems that I feel the need to at least have my thoughts put down somewhere, and that's what this podcast is. These two systems I know so well. I'd like to talk so much more about them, so that is why I am here today to tell you, hey, you should listen to this podcast. Listen to it a little bit more, at least the next few episodes, and figure out whether or not this type of game or this type of system or even this type of setting is for you, because you don't need to play in order to enjoy these systems. A lot of the lore and the backstory for these settings can be enjoyed on their own as a literary element, rather than something that you're using to enhance a gameplay. Either way, please come back next week where we talk a little bit more about Cyberpunk and Night City as a setting. I'm very excited and I can't wait to get there. I'm Tyler Hapney, and this has been Dungeons and Dystopias.